And I think that is a very common factor in the Asian community where it won't feel like our child. I'm like, well, I promise you, give it a week, they'll feel like they're your child.
Years ago, there was an assumption that same-sex couples might only be considered for adoption of children with very significant needs or very significant disabilities, and that isn't the case. I think social workers today look for matches that is right for the child, and not using same-sex adopters as a last resort. In terms of our daughter, we were the first resort. Her social worker looked at profiles of a number of adopters, and she chose us first because she felt that we could offer what was right for a 3-month-old baby with no adverse background characteristics. She'd been taken at birth, but there was nothing in her background that was of any significant concern, and an LGBTQ adopter may assume that a baby in that category might automatically be placed with a male-female couple. And that isn't the case. It's about what's right for that particular child. I think adopting has helped me to be more confident about who I am. Because you have to be, because you are out there with your children, and you have no secrets when you have small children, because they tell everyone, and I feel really proud of what we've done, and we've got great children who are thriving, and we will sit at dinner in a restaurant as a family and have strangers coming up to us to comment on how lovely it is and how great the children are. And I think that is a sign of people seeing that it's children with two dads and going out their way to validate that and say, we accept you. I don't really think they're coming over just to say the children are well behaved. I think strangers feel the need to validate a same-sex couple raising children, and that's been a hugely affirming thing, and something that we're really proud of, and it's helped us to be very confident about being seen out there with our children. And some adopted children benefit from a same-sex environment. So there are children who, if they've been horribly abused by a male figure, having two mums at home might actually be a really good placement for that child. And again, that's the expertise of the family finders in meeting the child's needs, because that's what it's all about. It's the child and their needs that is the most important thing.
As a single adopter, they just wanted to know that I had support in place. So I had to nominate one person that would, be my specific support when I needed it. And that was my mum. I know I could ring her. I mean, I've texted her at 2:00 in the morning before and said, his temperature is 0.2 above what it should be. And she's round within 5 minutes, sleeping on the sofa just to make sure that I'm okay and he's okay. Because I have not got that other person in the house to say, oh my God, is this temperature okay? And it's completely normal. It's still flashing as green, but it's me being scared because I've got nobody else. Or in the very early days, I remember my social worker saying, you'll be your child's safe pair of hands, but you need a safe pair of hands for you as well. And your routine, your old routine of what time you have your tea or when you have a shower, that completely goes out the window in the early days until you figure out a new routine.
That just goes out the window.
But it was like I didn't have time to do my ironing. So my mum would come around and she'd take my ironing, or I hadn't figured out how to cook tea whilst having a baby that then didn't want to go to sleep till 10 p.m. So she'd bring me round something to eat. And I would have struggled without her, I think. It
I
would
want
have
to be
been-
adopted by your mum. She's
She's fabulous.
Can she do
She's-
our
we just don't do it.
Yeah, my advice to anybody adopting is, whether you're single, whether you're in a couple, is please make sure you've got support, because you need it. No matter how you become a parent, you need support. But I think with adoption, it's overwhelming, and your life changes instantly.
I think it's important for us to sort of embrace the fact that the world is changing. Not everybody can have kids when they want to, and why should you go your whole life without having kids? And I think it's that stigma in the Asian community where it's like, well, it's not your child, so it's not really your child. But I'm like, well, no, it's not that anymore. There's a variety of reasons why people can't have kids. So it's in a way you're only hurting yourself in your own life by not adopting. Like, well, again, one of my friends wanted to. They've been trying to have kids for years, and for them, adoption wasn't even an issue. I was like, oh, really, adoption? I'm like, well, yeah, you're like me. Why wouldn't it be an issue for you? Like, what's your reason behind it? And they were like, oh, we never thought it was for us. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? What thought for you? Explain yourself. And they were like, well, we just thought it wouldn't really feel like our own child. And I think that is a very common factor in the Asian community where it won't feel like our child. I'm like, well, I promise you, give it a week, they'll feel like they're your child. And I think it's just that first step of like taking that step of seeing someone who has adopted. And I think now that we have, and people have seen us, they're like, well, actually, it's worked for these guys quite well. So maybe it's just something we will look into. I think we were quite lucky in terms of we happened to find a mixed race child. So it wasn't so I'm unsure as to what the mix was. So if they hadn't turned up, we may have adopted a white child or a black child or a Chinese child or whatever, and that wouldn't be the thing for us. Like I think the hardest thing in the Asian community is how it appears to look to the outside world. Like if it's just literally me and my wife in the world and that was it, it'd be absolutely fine. But I think in the Asian community, you have to sort of look beyond that and think of, okay, how will your extended family look at it? I think that's when the problems start occurring. Well, actually, no. If you get a white child, it won't look like us. If you get a black child, it won't look like us. Well, that's fine. But then families are so different and diverse these days. You have to accept it. And why should an innocent black or white Chinese child be left on the shelf essentially because they don't look like us? It's just crazy.
You've got to be open to. We all have an idea of how we see our little family, and I think maybe just broaden your expectations a little bit, because I was terrified when I was happy with the 3, but our youngest was only 13 months, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it's a baby, what am I going to do with a baby? And I was terrified of not the older 2 that were potentially going to be harder work, but to get them to attach to me. But the little one, just the sort of having a really little one terrified me, because we'd sort of said originally, she's too young. She's too young. Could we cope with that?
Yes, we had that experience. The first one had been 20 months, which was very different to then having an 8 months old, which was a totally new experience of how do you deal with a child who was still a proper baby. She wasn't crawling at that stage, and that was very, very different and not something that we'd considered would happen. So I think it's about being adaptable and showing some compromise. I think you do need to work out what your red lines are. But to not be too constrained by that picture.
Because you could miss out on those perfect children for you.
Children,
because if we had been more constrained,
we wouldn't have had our
missed out on our 3. And I just, it makes me.
And trust the social worker.
Yeah.
If the social worker says, look, I know this slightly outside what you've set, but I think this is going to be a really good match, because they don't want a match to fail any more than you want it to fail. So they won't give you or recommend a child if they don't think it's going to be right for you. So if it is slightly outside what you're thinking, then don't discard it. Think about it, because
if you're curious and if you explore different possibilities, and if you go to some of the profiling events and read different descriptions of children and maybe begin to move out of a comfort zone into something that you can do, but maybe you just need to find your own confidence to believe that you can take on some issues that may be slightly more complex than you originally thought you were capable of.
I think that's so true what you say there about trusting the social worker, because when we went through the traffic light system of saying what you think you can take on, what you thought you couldn't, although you felt guilty, the social worker would say, hold on, it's okay. It's okay to say no, it's okay for that to frighten you. And, they'd spent so much time with you, they'd got to know you, and they, as professionals, they know what needs you can meet before you're even telling them, really. And that's really good, because you might say, I think I can take this on, and actually a social worker might say, okay, but have you thought about this situation? And you might not have. So I think trusting them and trusting their judgment, and if they come to you and say, look, we've got, because they wouldn't say we've made a match, they'd say, like, we've got a link, let's have a chat about it. And if they're doing that and that falls outside of the parameters of what you originally thought you wanted, trust them. They know you.
And your social worker won't even talk to you about a child that they don't think.
No, exactly.
You won't even know about that child.
Yeah.
You'll only know about the ones that they think is going to be a good fit, for both you and the child. So.
And it's crazy the amount of work that actually goes on before they talk to you about a child. I didn't realise how much they do before they even approach you in thinking, is this the right match? Shall we talk to this adopter about this child? So yeah, they really, in my opinion, they know what they're doing. I did go and I was very specific. I wanted a little boy and I wanted a baby. And I did think, is that going to go against me? Why do you want a boy, or why do you want a baby? But it was just how I saw my life. I saw my life as a mum to a little boy, and my social worker, she just got it. She was like, yeah, like, that's fine. You can do that. So although it might make you wait a bit longer, and adopters might be waiting, they might think, it feels like a long time. You're waiting to get your child, and you'd wait a lifetime to be with your child, and that's the result at the end, isn't it? So, like we've all said, it's worth it. As painful as it might seem, waiting, it will be worth it.